Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Trevor with Trevor Shepard Severe Weather, and today we will be going over severe weather misnomers, misconceptions, and truths. Today I've got a special guest, Ben. He is the driver whenever we do severe weather's chasing. Anytime you see any sort of photographs, videos, 9 times out of 10, he's the guy behind the wheel. So, Ben, tell everybody about yourself a little bit.
Well, thanks, Trevor. I appreciate you having me on today, and it's definitely been fun the past couple years going through and chasing these storms and trying to inform the public and getting on them. So it's something I've had a ball with. There's definitely a lot of risk to what we do. Every time we go out, we rely a lot on technology, and inevitably that technology tends to fail.
9 times out of 10 it does fail.
So, we both know we've got to rely on our wits, our knowledge of the road systems to get out of dangerous situations.
Yep, especially, kind of touching base on that with why it's so important to have some sort of warning system that's not internet-based or cell phone-based, because especially if you're in a rural area where you may not get 5G service, weather radio is a literal lifesaver.
Yeah, and there's a big difference between a weather alert radio and a regular weather radio. Is that something you could tell us?
Yeah, so a regular just weather radio is simply the National Weather Service actually has a broadcast system that just gives you the daily weather updates. Whether it's going to be sunny, rainy, what it's going to be doing. It's a pretty general, not exactly laser focused forecast. However, a weather alert radio will automatically activate whenever there's a storm warning, whether it's a severe thunderstorm warning or a severe, winter storm, tornado warnings, significant lightning warnings, those type of things. And what's nice about those is they will automatically update. You don't have to make sure they're turned on. As long as you've got batteries and or it's plugged in, you're good to go. Also, these work on radio, so you don't have to worry about cell phone service. You don't have to worry about, if your satellites are in the area, if it's cloudy or sunny. It's one of the best way to get consistent warnings.
So you're saying it's really important to know the difference when
it's important. So if you're going out to buy, severe weather season is quickly approaching us. It's already here. At the time of this recording, there's a significant outbreak going on in Texas. So if you're going to go out and purchase a new weather, make sure it's an actual weather alert radio. They tend to be a little more expensive, but it's worth it in the long run because it could save you or your family's lives.
Yeah, it sounds like it's really worth it. Now, Trev, we talk about that misnomer a little bit, and the whole theme of this podcast is misnomers and mistruths about severe weather. Where did this start? I don't really know. When did all these things come about that we're getting ready to talk about?
So, the study. And I want to caveat this with everybody that, we are not trained meteorologists. However, we are extreme weather enthusiasts, and we've done a lot of personal research, and we know some things. Again, caveat this with if we make any sort of mistakes, please let us know. But for the most part, I think we're pretty knowledgeable. A lot of these misnomers comes from the fact that severe weather research, especially when it concerns tornadoes, is still pretty new. Hardcore scientific research really didn't start into the 1970s with Dr. Fujita, but from that time frame, from literally the 1880s until then, tornadoes were considered an act of God. Literally from, I think it was 1897 till the 1950s, it was literally illegal to even say the word tornado. The FCC banned the word.
That's crazy.
You could lose your license or be fined for saying it. And now, that being said, kind of going off track here, the National Weather Service used to be known as the Weather Bureau, and they actually banned the word as well until 1938. The FCC, however, held this ban until 1950. And they cited they didn't want to do or incite any sort of panic with the word tornado. Again, they said this is an act of God. They can't be predicted. It's like an earthquake. There's no sense of adding panic. Because generally when a tornado struck, especially back then, with no warning, the casualty numbers were extraordinarily high. And so you could kind of perceive that back in the day where they didn't want to say, oh, there's a tornado coming. Everybody starts panicking and freaking out. And then, it's mass pandemonium. But
yeah, you don't want that. You don't want that, especially at that time.
In hindsight, though, it seems pretty terrible that they wouldn't warn people about imminent threats. But, in the same hand, there was no warning system, really.
You saw it, right?
Yeah,
you either saw it, you saw it or you didn't.
And so that was their warning system. But as time progressed and research began, actually the first tornado warning was issued by Robert C. Miller on Tinker Air Force Base in 1948. And this was a big, long term, but he actually got in trouble for it, too, for there's a big inquiry. Lucky for him, the tornado actually happened. And so they were like, oh, maybe this is real science, and maybe we should start doing some research.
Yeah, it's not quasi-science or anything.
It's not
real.
It is predictable-ish. But we're still... Getting back on track, we're still seeing some of the after effects from these. So the person that actually started this, a lot of these misnomers and rumors, was a man named John Park Finley. And he worked for the United States Army Signal Corps. And this was kind of a detachment of the Weather Bureau. Ulysses S. Grant at the time was president. And he went ahead and said, hey, we need good weather forecasting. And so the National Weather Service was born. And this guy was assigned to research a little bit into tornadoes. And obviously in 1880, we didn't have radio zones. We didn't have weather radar. It was really just visual and anecdotal evidence. And so he wrote a book that was kind of the book until the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And a lot of misnomers were born from there, and so word of mouth traveled. One of the biggest ones, I would say, that came from this, specifically from this book, is the fact that you should be in the southwest corner of a basement or wherever you're taking shelter in. This was perceived because most storm motion, which is the direction in which a storm is traveling, is... from north or south to northeast. And so whenever they would see these damage paths or see these tornadoes moving along the ground, they would assume that opposite end of the corner, but research is now showing.
We know that's not true at all. Yeah, it's wherever the strongest structural support is.
And it's completely false information. I mean, if it's a sufficient tornado, it's going to just destroy.
Yeah, it's going that way already, right?
Wherever, I mean, which could lead into another kind of misnomer of tornadoes missing a house or hitting a house. Why did to quote the movie Twister? Why did it miss this house but hit my house? And this is actually very, very recent science. Within the last couple of years, they've actually discovered there's actually multiple vortices within tornadoes, and they hypothesize that this is the reason why, one house may get missed, but the neighbor's house gets destroyed, because there's actually multiple tornadoes inside a single vortex.
Well, and this is something we saw on the very first tornado we ever got on a few years ago, was a couple vortices coming off the main shaft.
Yes, this is it was a very strong tornado. It had multiple vortices, and which, for anybody that doesn't know what that is, please feel free to Google it, because it's a very interesting phenomena. Now, what I'm getting ready to say here is actually going to somewhat contradict one of our other myths of tornadoes, but generally, whenever you see multi-vortices, it's a very strong tornado, and it's a good rule to kind of abide by. So whenever you see that, it's pretty bad. That being said, we're going to go to another myth here. The myth is you can always see a tornado coming, and you can always tell how strong it is by how big it is, and that is absolutely false.
No, yeah, that kind of be more far off base there.
The actual definition of a tornado is a violently rotating column of air. Air is 100% invisible. You cannot see it. Same thing with a tornado. until a tornado starts picking up debris or gets a pressure low enough that it starts condensing and creates a condensation funnel, it's completely invisible. There may be a tornado on the ground that you just can't see. Not to mention the fact, we've seen this multiple times where a tornado is completely rain wrapped, so heavy precipitation is falling, hides the tornado completely. This was the case for the Joplin 2011 tornado. It was a heavily rain wrapped tornado. No one could see it, and which may have even led to the significant death count in that tornado because, again...
Sad to say, yeah, perception's reality in a lot of cases.
Yeah, and so, unfortunately, this is bad practice. A lot of people want to try to see the tornado before they take action. In some cases, you don't have time.
It's moving too fast. It's too large. You can't tell. You can't tell how far it is
exactly.
away. Sure. Without radar. Whenever,
a tornado warning's issued, it's kind of human instinct to say, well, let me go look outside. But even in 2021, some instances, an average warning time is only 3 minutes. That's not very long, especially if let's say you're sleeping in bed.
You've got kids in the next room,
you've got kids
animals.
in the room, animals. You've got 3 minutes to get everyone up, dressed, ready to go into shelter. Sometimes that, and then in some cases, there is no warning because the tornado occurs so quickly that even the National Weather Service says, hey, there's a tornado here, but that 6-minute window when the radar rotates, we didn't see it. And so...
Now you maybe have a minute or 2 minutes of warning.
Well,
we talk about where to go inside the house a little bit, Trevor, about that misnomer. I think a lot of people think, a bathroom's the safest place. A lot of times that is the case.
Yep.
But if it's external...
And I would say that would fall definitely into the window of misconception because it's hounded a lot. The most important information, I think, whenever you see a tornado warning would be the interior center part of your home. Statistically, that is the safest part. Yeah. Whenever a building or house collapses or is destroyed, generally that is where it collapses to. And so it'll form somewhat of a TP style rubble to where you can hopefully survive that.
Yeah, protect it a little bit. Yeah.
Also, the number one killer in tornadoes is actually missile debris. And this is any sort of object that is picked up and projected, at high speeds,
It could be grass.
Yeah,
I mean, we've seen hay sticking through poles. It can happen.
2x4s, trees, limbs, cars. So when you're in the interior part of your home, that'll help protect you. The more walls you have, the better. That being said, though, there's a lot of older homes that are built with bathrooms on the exterior side of the house. And that could be very fatal. 9 times out of 10, if your home is going to be destroyed in a tornado, the exterior walls are going to be completely gone. And so if you're in a bathroom that isn't on the exterior side of your home, that could be very detrimental to your health. This is why if you got like a small closet or a hallway in the middle of your home, that's best. Obviously, though, the best protection would be to be underground or in a safe room.
Absolutely. Comes down to making smart plays quickly.
Yep.
And that can be difficult to do. So that's what we're trying to do today, too, with these misnomers is give you guys a little ammunition for when these things happen, and hopefully you think about it and you're a little more well prepared. Moving on here, though, one thing I always heard growing up, Trevor, was, well, I live in a big city and tornadoes don't hit them. I don't know if this is because people correlate that with mountains killing off storms. A mountain's a lot different than, say, downtown Kansas City, Chicago, St. Louis. What do you think about this, Trevor, and why do you think people believe this?
Well, again, this is a big myth perpetrated from that book in the 1800s about where tornadoes strike. You got to think back in the 1800s, especially in the late 1800s, Tornado Alley was still considered the Wild West. And there was not, you had Dodge City, you had Kansas City, you had Dallas, these types of cities that were prone to tornadoes statistically didn't get hit often because it's like throwing darts in a dartboard. You never know exactly where that tornado is going to hit. However, today populations have expanded. These have
suburbs have grown.
Suburbs.
Sure.
These have big areas of populations, farms, rural communities, and towns. And so now all bets are off. Frequently, large cities are actually hit. For example, I think it was last year, Dallas, Fort Worth area got hit. Memphis got hit very hard. That was a large fatality incident. St. Louis is actually the number one on the list for metropolitan areas getting struck by tornadoes. In the past 20 years, it's been hit 4 times with significant tornadoes. Also, look at Moore, Oklahoma. That's probably one of the most frequently struck cities in the nation. I can't confirm that off the top of my head here, but it is consistently hit by destructive tornadoes. And again, this myth, like I said, came from the 1800s when they said, well, we're looking at the research here and no towns are getting hit. And that's because nobody lived there at the time. But, where a field was 100 years ago, it's now a large metropolitan city.
So it's just a matter of time. So
yes, it's just
travel,
a matter of time.
Yeah, have family in those cities. It's something they should be aware of too.
During the Tuscaloosa, Alabama tornado, that was one of the big things cited, that nobody thought tornadoes hit big cities. And so that's why they didn't take it too seriously, because they thought, oh, well, a tornado can't hit a big city. And that was obviously a very devastating storm that happened.
So you got to be careful.
Yeah.
You got to be real careful with those ideas. Now, if you are out and about in a car, let's say you're not in a position at home, or you're going home from work or something like that, where do you go? Do you go under an overpass, to a ditch, to a building? I mean, these are all things I think we should explore. What do you think some of those misnomers are?
Well, that's another good dangerous myth that we can talk about. The perception that you can outdrive a tornado. Now, again, some of this information, it's kind of a gray area. Let's say, for example, you're driving down the highway, across the radio, tornado warning, take shelter now. You look in your rear view mirror and you see a tornado. Your best bet's just to keep driving. That being said, if you don't see the tornado, this does not mean go looking for the tornado. If you cannot instantly see the tornado when that tornado warning goes off, you need to find shelter. Your car is not shelter. Even small, weak tornadoes will absolutely devastate a car. I've seen the arguments of cars having, we have airbags and seat belts. That won't save you. It will turn your car into a ball of tin.
Or Swiss cheese, debris going through.
A significant amount of casualties from the Joplin tornado was actually from the highway getting hit with active, drivers on there. You do not want to be in a car in a tornado. So something else that I see constantly, again, this myth is a huge one. It is very deadly. Do not believe it. Do not count on it to save you or your family's lives. Whenever you're driving and you see a tornado or have a tornado warning, you think, oh, here's an overpass. Let's take shelter under it. This is the worst place you can actually hide during a tornado. This myth was perpetuated from I believe it was a documentary film in the late 90s. And it was also cited in a Time magazine article in 1999 about how safe overpasses are for tornadoes. This is completely false. In fact,
not true.
Wind speed velocities, especially with tornadoes, actually increase with height. And so as you're elevated within an overpass, the wind speed's actually going to get even more. And then you get I don't know the scientific term for it, but like a tube effect. You're either going to get sucked out or whatever debris is going to get instantly smashed in there. And the probability of death is, significantly higher than it would be to say finding a structure, a well-built structure. Like let's say you're driving along, there's a gas station, and they've got a beer cooler, for example. That could be a decent, place to hide.
Yeah, absolutely. Brahms ice cream store, even. I mean, anywhere with a cooler, right? Anywhere with a massive metal casing.
There's been many cases of this happening, people surviving significant tornadoes when they've hidden these types of structures. Or, for example, you know the location you're at, you know the area, and they have a FEMA-safe shelter. I have personally some reservations with these. Part of this is because, again, it's paradoxical to say we've got a FEMA shelter for the city to use, so we're going to encourage everyone to get in their cars and drive to this location during an active tornado. That being said, most tornado warnings now, the actual, I think, national average warning time is like 13 minutes.
Which is plenty, should be plenty of time
in theory. But again, to hit back at our earlier conversation, sometimes you may only have as short as 3 minutes. So obviously, if you've got the roadways completely congested with people trying to get to FEMA shelters, that could be a setup for catastrophe.
You find yourself in a much worse situation than if you had stayed home.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. So in those situations where you don't feel confident in your home protecting you, like let's say you live in a mobile home or
an apartment, maybe second floor of an apartment.
That's that instance. I would risk it potentially to travel there.
Or if you're close to the shelter,
right? If you live across the street or within a minute or two of this location, that would be good. I would definitely try to, especially if you're in a big, larger city. I would try to avoid traveling by car because you're going to get gridlocked, and that is so much more deadly than trying to just hold out in your home.
Well, let's say you survive, right? Let's say the tornado passes and you're in your vehicle. You don't know if your route back to your home safe. There could be down power lines. There could be sewage mains broke. There could be gas mains disrupted. I mean, there's a lot of risk outside just the tornado, too, right?
Yep,
for being outside. Exactly.
Not to mention the fact, lightning, hail, and all that stuff, falling debris, that comes into play. It's common knowledge, lay in a low-lying area or a ditch. Again, that could be misconstrued as a small little... if it's all you got, it's all you got.
Yeah, it's better than your vehicle.
Yeah,
right.
It's better than the vehicle. Preferably something that is pretty decently deep in the ground. And the idea behind a ditch is similar to a protection like a soldier would use, like a foxhole or something. That debris is actually going to go over the top of you. Again, though, this is. I would prefer to find an actual well-built structure. Now, larger structures, like big box stores or, large home improvement stores have been proven in the past to actually not be very good protection. I know there's a lot of big box stores that were actually under investigation after the Joplin tornado because their buildings failed so significantly.
And you got to think, what is that? A big box store, or a retail establishment, it's just tin on the outside. It's just metal around it or corrugated concrete just at a low level. So there's, it acts as a big sail when the wind comes and it fails in critical points.
Yep. And, that's another misnomer, too, of people that live in an all-brick home, for example. 9 times out of 10, especially modern-built brick homes, those aren't actually fully brick homes. Those are brick veneer. And so it's nothing more than like a siding. And brick is not a protector against flying missile debris. 9 times out of 10, a 2x4 is going through a brick wall with ease. Some sort of reinforced concrete structure. That being said, though, again, the Joplin tornado did a lot of crazy things. For example, the famous hospital incident, the tornado was strong enough to actually twist and remove the hospital, or at least one of the towers, off of its foundation by 4 inches. So even that reinforced, well-built structure was moved. That's how strong these things are potentially. That's why it's so important to take these warnings so seriously, because you never know when or where or how this storm's going to happen. And kind of falling back again, do not ever try to just outrun a tornado. Another story is the Reno Tornado. A lot of famous storm chasers, professional storm chasers, were actually killed while trying to outmaneuver a tornado because Their paths are completely unpredictable. They could be going north one minute and south the next. They can do loop-de-loops. They can stand still. They can go left or right. It doesn't matter. And so if you're trying to outrun a tornado at any given time, it may actually end up impacting you. Not to mention the fact that a satellite tornado could be anywhere around this in the vicinity. So there may be 2 or more tornadoes at any given time. You just don't know. It's not a safe bet.
Yeah, and there's other risk factors like rear flank downdraft.
Not to mention too, though, I would argue one of the most dangerous things during a tornado warning, and you're in your vehicle, is another human being. Someone else could panic, or they could be not paying attention to the road, and this happens every single year. Storm chasers are killed in car accidents because it's human error. I mean, you're watching the skies. The next thing you know, you're rear-end somebody, and
that's it.
Yep.
That's it, unfortunately. Now, Trevor, a big thing I hear all the time is, well, I didn't hear the tornado siren, and maybe that person was in their house or, they're far away from the siren. Thankfully, we have cell phones now, and in our area, our news station provides these warnings, but what is a tornado siren really meant for? Is
right. I'm glad you brought that up. That's actually a big pet peeve of mine. Is I always hear that after severe weather. Well, I never heard the tornado sirens. Well, if you're in your home, you're not meant to. They're technically known as civil defense sirens. These were from the 70s and 80s of Red Russia and nuclear weapons and all that stuff. They've been converted to alert people that are out of doors. So if you're outside walking your dog, you're probably going to hear those tornado sirens. It's an indistinguishable sound. Anybody in the Midwest or any tornado-prone areas, I'm sure they hear them all the time, especially when they test them.
Yeah, I test them on Wednesdays.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do not rely on tornado sirens to be your warning. Whenever that activates, it's usually too late. That's one of those, oh crap moments. You're at the city park. Find shelter right now. Find the lowest part of the ground, something like that. Do not rely on those tornado sirens, especially if you're in your home. That's why we're talking about emergency activated radios, phone alerts.
Turning on the news.
Yep, the news. Yeah. All that stuff. Because, again, the tornado sirens are just not a reliable source. Also, the way tornado sirens work, they produce significant heat, and so they will not stay turned on during the entire event. They may only turn on for 3 minutes, before they have to cool down again. And so
you may think it's all clear.
Exactly. That's a big mistake. Well, the tornado sirens aren't sounding anymore. That doesn't mean anything. Sometimes they have to cool down, and so you may hear it for only a few seconds and say, oh, well, it must have passed, and that's not the case.
Not always the case, yeah. Now, let's say you are outside at the park walking your dog and the skies are blue and you hear the sirens going off. That may be a good indication that a tornado is coming. I mean, just because the skies are blue.
Exactly. That's another big pet peeve of mine. Recently, it was National Severe Weather Week, and nationally across the country, severe weather sirens and the emergency activation system, they were all tested. And everybody was saying, oh, a tornado on a sunny day, what? That doesn't make any sense. And in fact, generally, when your news station is calling for severe weather and the skies are blue preceding this, that's generally a warning sign. That's going to allow much stronger convection, much stronger instability to occur. And in fact, right before the Joplin tornado, the skies were blue, the sun was hot and shiny, it was muggy that day. It was considered a beautiful sunny day, and I believe the warning time was 20 minutes before the Joplin tornado. And so, of course, 20 minutes before the storm hit, the skies are blue, the sun's shining.
Nobody's taking it serious.
Nobody's
and I don't blame them, right? I mean, if you don't know, then how would you know?
Exactly.
Right?
And this is why it's so important, too. On most smartphones, there's actually a setting to turn on and make sure your emergency activation system is turned on. If you've got cell service, that's generally a very reliable way of getting those warnings because they will happen instantly. The second the National Weather Service activates that warning, a lot of times, in many cases, and I've seen this personally, that it will actually activate many minutes before your town or city's tornado sirens activate. And again, this is why you do not rely on tornado sirens to warn you. especially if you feel like you're asleep. I've heard that one too. Well, I didn't hear the tornado. They didn't wake me up. They're not supposed to. Your phone or your radio needs to be waking you up.
Yeah, they're meant for somebody outside. Unless you may live right next to one, and obviously it'd wake you up. But
right.
If you live, a couple miles away, or maybe you live in a rural area where you wouldn't hear them even if they were going off, right?
Exactly. Again, so don't rely on blue skies to warn you about a tornado, because sometimes that doesn't mean anything. In fact, it could mean dangers on the way.
Yeah, the conditions are more apt for severe weather.
That's another good segue for another myth of the sky always turns green before a tornado. Again, that's not true at all. Where this myth kind of comes from, again, is from this 1800s book of tornadic events. So the phenomena of the sky turning green,
there's some validity there, though, right?
There is,
I mean, from like hail.
Exactly. So what will occur is, with a strong enough updraft in a storm, it'll create what's known as a hail core, and basically that's an updraft sucking up and keeping the hail inside of it. And so when the sunlight shines through that, it'll actually turn like a bright blue teal or a green.
Kind of an aqua. Yeah, beautiful, but
extremely beautiful. But that is also indicative of, hey, that's a strong storm. Stay away from it, because you're going to get pelted by big hail. And generally speaking, when that happens back in the day, people would see that and say, "Oh, a tornado's on the way," because it has been observed that with the hail core, generally, if a storm is strong enough to produce a hail core that produces that type of effect, it's generally strong enough to produce a tornado. But again, you should not rely on that either. It's a poor folklore tale. Again, we have actual technology now to actually indicate, hey, storms are coming. Don't rely on the sky turning green to be your cue to take shelter.
And you're definitely right, Trevor. Those are all really good points, and I think that hits the nail on the head of what we've been trying to do today, is go over different misconceptions, misnomers, why they exist, how to kind of overcome them, and hopefully you walk away with this feeling a little more educated, and you feel a little more prepared when coming in contact with storms.
Yeah, and if there's anything else that you guys feel like we may be left out, or if there's a myth you've heard that we didn't cover, let us know in the comments below. Anything revolving weather, let us know, and we can talk about it next. This is all we've got time for today, and we will see you guys on the next one. Make sure, if you haven't already, to find Trevor Shepard Severe Weather on Facebook, hit that follow button, and we'll see you on the next one.